Beneath the sand of Giza, something is watching. Not the Sphinx you know, not the one tourists photograph at sunrise, the one that has stared east for 45 centuries. Another one. In late 2025, ground-penetrating radar swept across the plateau and returned a signal no one expected. A mound, over 100 feet tall, sitting in near-perfect symmetry with the Great Sphinx itself. Too aligned to be random, too precise to be sand, and buried beneath it, the unmistakable shadow of chambers, tunnels, a structure that shouldn't exist, unless Giza was never meant to have only one guardian. Today, we go beneath the surface of the most famous monument on Earth and ask the question Egyptologists have whispered about for over a century. What if the Sphinx has a twin? To understand why this discovery matters, you have to understand what Giza actually is. It isn't just 3 pyramids and a statue. It's a landscape engineered down to the inch. Causeways, temples, and a guardian carved directly from the plateau's own limestone bedrock, facing the rising sun with mathematical intent. For decades, researchers have noticed something strange in the layout. The Sphinx doesn't sit at the center of the site. It sits off to one side, as if balancing something, as if Giza's symmetry was built for 2. Then came the new scans. Synthetic aperture radar, the same family of technology used to map ice sheets and buried cities, picked up a dense, geometric anomaly south of the main enclosure. A mound roughly 33 meters high, its internal structure showing what appears to be cavities, arranged in deliberate, repeating patterns. Not natural fractures. Not erosion. Patterns. Researchers studying the data noted that the anomaly's position mirrors the Great Sphinx's location relative to the second pyramid, almost like a reflection across an invisible line drawn through the plateau. And then there's the inscription that started this theory, long before satellites existed. It's called the Dream Stele, a granite slab standing between the Sphinx's paws, carved more than 3,000 years ago, describing a pharaoh's vision of the monument, speaking to him in his sleep. Buried in its weathered hieroglyphs, some translators have identified a reference that doesn't quite fit a single statue, a phrasing that implies a pair, 2 seated forms, 2 watchers. For a long time, that line was dismissed as poetic flourish. But pair it with a 100-foot anomaly, sitting in geometric harmony with the original Sphinx, and the poetic flourish starts to look like a memory of something the desert swallowed. If there really is a second Sphinx, it raises an uncomfortable question. What happened to it? And that question leads us straight back to the one we already have, and to one of the most repeated myths in modern history. You've probably heard it. Napoleon's soldiers, bored and trigger-happy, supposedly used the Sphinx's face for cannon target practice, blowing off its nose in a fit of imperial vandalism. It's a great story. It's also completely false. Sketches made by European travelers decades before Napoleon ever set foot in Egypt already show the Sphinx without its nose. One detailed drawing from the late 1700s, predating the French campaign entirely, depicts the same damage we see today. Whatever happened to that nose? It happened long before a single French cannon arrived on the plateau. So what really caused it? The leading theory has nothing to do with soldiers at all. Medieval Arabic accounts describe a man, centuries before Napoleon, deliberately damaging the statue's face, reportedly in a fit of religious zeal against what he saw as idolatry. Tool marks around the nose and lower face support a slow, deliberate chiseling, not the blunt, instantaneous blast of artillery fire. In other words, the Sphinx didn't lose its face to war. It lost it to a human hand, long after it had already stood watch for thousands of years, with wind, sand, and time wearing at it the whole way. It's a smaller mystery than a buried twin, but it tells you something important about Giza as a whole. The stories we've inherited about this place are often wrong, not because the truth is boring, but because the truth has been buried under easier explanations for centuries. Just like, perhaps, an entire second monument has been buried under sand. To understand whether a twin Sphinx is even possible, we need to understand how the first one was actually made, and by whom. For over a century, pop culture insisted ancient Egypt's monuments couldn't have been built by ordinary people. Slaves, lost civilizations, outside intervention. anything but skilled human labor. The evidence tells a far more grounded and frankly more impressive story. The Great Sphinx wasn't built block by block. It was carved directly out of a single ridge of limestone, left behind when workers quarried stone for the pyramids nearby. Picture it. An entire hillside, slowly cut away on every side, until a body, paws, and a face emerged from rock that had been sitting there since before humans existed. That takes more than brute force. It takes planning. It takes generations of stonemasons who understood exactly where the bedrock was strong enough to hold its shape and where it would crumble. And these weren't slaves driven by the lash, as Hollywood loved to suggest. Excavations of nearby worker villages uncovered bakeries, breweries, and medical facilities. Evidence of a fed, housed, and cared-for labor force, with skeletal remains showing signs of healed fractures that had been properly treated. These were professionals, rotated through labor seasons, fed a diet rich enough to sustain the kind of work that shaped a god out of stone. And here's something that rarely makes it into the textbooks. The Sphinx wasn't always the bare, sand-colored monument we see today. Traces of pigment recovered from the statue's surface suggest it was once painted in bold color. Reds across the face, blues and yellows elsewhere on the body. Far from a silent, weathered figure, the original Sphinx may have been a vivid, almost startling presence on the horizon, fully visible from miles away under the Egyptian sun. A guardian carved from living rock, painted in color, fed by a trained workforce who knew exactly what they were building. If they could do that once, what's stopping them from doing it twice? There's an old legend that surfaces in fragments across ancient texts. The idea that Giza once held two great guardians, and that one was destroyed. Some versions blame the sky itself, a strike of lightning, a fire from the heavens, reducing a second Sphinx to rubble long before recorded history began. It's tempting to dismiss it instantly. Myths blame lightning for everything, from floods to fallen empires. But mainstream geology offers its own explanation, and it's almost as dramatic. The plateau sits on layered limestone of wildly different strengths, soft bands sandwiched between hard ones. If a second formation existed in a section of weaker rock, it wouldn't have needed a god's wrath to fall apart. Wind, rain, and thousands of years of erosion would have been more than capable of erasing it, down to an unrecognizable mound. A myth about destruction from the sky, a science that points to slow destruction by time. Two very different stories, and right now, only one buried hill that might decide which one is closer to the truth. Until excavation actually breaks ground on that anomaly, everything we've discussed remains a theory, a compelling one, built on radar data, ancient inscriptions, and the undeniable symmetry of a plateau that has never done anything by accident. But if there is a second face down there, staring up through the dark for 4,000 years, Giza isn't finished telling its story, and neither are we.